Tread carefully, my friend. Those scribblings keep the wraiths at bay. While running from those creatures, I have lost the only thing that could get me out of this precarious situation. My potion flask. If you could retrieve it for me, somewhere further northbound, I would be forever in your debt. My hopes were not in vain. Thank you, my dear friend. Please take good care of yourself, so we shall meet again in safety enough. It is a great relief to see you again. My humble services will be forever at your disposal. They are the only thing that I can currently offer in return for my rescue. Besides my eternal gratefulness, I can supply you with beverages and potions that might increase your odds down in the halls. For now, a bottle of wine is all I can offer. But if you'd find the right ingredients and additional flasks, I could expand my repertoire. trace of blood led us into the darkness, where two morbid shrines awaited. Each of them demanded a sacrifice in exchange for a fragment of a powerful token. The token of pain, which betrayed its old master and would yield us the power to finally end his atrocious reign.
Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. We've got some very important news for Ukraine. The United States is sending hundreds of thousands of cluster munitions to Ukraine. The DPICM cluster shells will help break Russia's stubborn trench networks and keep Ukraine's supply of critical artillery up. Now, this is a very controversial decision. For example, here's the Twitter account War Monitor, and most people following this account support Ukraine. He conducted a poll in which 78,000 people participated, asking the question, do you support the U.S. transfer of cluster munitions to Ukraine? 54% responded no. So we need to talk about that in this video, and I want to make the arguments why sending cluster munitions to Ukraine is definitely a good thing. So first, let's quick talk about international law. There is an international treaty banning cluster munitions, but with all international treaties, it only applies to the countries that signed that treaty. Ukraine, Poland, Russia, China, India, Brazil, the United States, none of these countries signed that treaty, so by international law, they're not bound to ban cluster munitions. But there are idiots on the far right and the far left all over the world that don't understand international law. So here's Medea Benjamin, the code founder of Code Pink. She just wants Ukraine to surrender and give Russia everything they want, stop fighting, stop resisting. And she tweeted, "Biden makes me sick. He just approved cluster munitions, a banned weapon, to Ukraine." And a community note on Twitter was added to her tweets because this is wrong. Cluster munitions are not banned in the United States, Ukraine, Russia, and other major powers, including China and India. So even if people understand international law, they're still going to seize on this opportunity to criticize President Biden because they support Russia. And if you haven't been introduced to RFK Jr., I'll go ahead and introduce him. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the nephew of the former president, John F. Kennedy, and the son of his brother, Robert Kennedy. And this guy is being paid by the Russians to run for president. He's challenging President Biden in the primary for the Democratic nomination. He's going to lose. He's then going to run in the general election to just try and siphon away and steal votes from Biden so that a Republican candidate who supports pulling funding and support for Ukraine will become elected. Russia has stated this is their war objective, to cause disruption in political elections in the West in order to weaken support for Ukraine, and RF Kennedy Jr. is their guy. This is what he says. Cluster bombs are munitions so horrific for civilians that more than 100 nations have signed an international treaty banning them. Now the Biden administration is preparing to send them to Ukraine. So RFK Jr. Is definitely being paid by the Russians. 2 weeks ago on Twitter, he put out this campaign promo, "Join the movement to save our nation." And in the promo, this is a stock photo of a Russian woman in Russia wearing a Kennedy 2024 sweater. You can see from the cafe signs in the background, it's in Russian Cyrillic. This cafe was geolocated inside of Russia, meaning there are Russian campaign graphic designers working for RFK making his material, and then he publishes it, on Twitter or wherever. He took down the post and refused to comment, but American graphic designers don't accidentally use stock photographs of Russians inside of Russia. So this guy is obviously a Russian agent, and RFK Jr. has never served in the military and never held any elected office. He's a trust fund baby with the golden name of Kennedy, so he's experienced a lot of wealth and privilege and access his entire life. The joke in the United States is beware C-average students who graduate from Harvard. He spent more than a decade bouncing around Ivy League universities and was a heroin addict in the 1980s. I'm all for second chances and redemption, but what is this guy's angle? What is this guy's story? It's simply to weaken President Biden and weaken support for Ukraine. So anybody on social media promoting or supporting this guy obviously supports Russia. So let's get back to the cluster munitions. And the United States announced another $800 million security assistance package. In the package, there's some great stuff, an additional 32 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, 32 Stryker armored personnel carriers. But here it is, 155 millimeter artillery rounds, including DPICM. So what DPICM cluster munitions are and why Ukraine wants them so bad? Let me try to explain this for you. So DPICM stands for Dual Purpose Improved Conventional Munition. This can be fired from Paladins, self-propelled howitzers, as well as towed howitzers like the M777. That is what Ukraine is going to be firing these from. And inside the round, there's either 88 or 72 bomblets, depending on the variant. And these bomblets are exactly what you think they are. They're basically grenades. They're the same size and power of a hand grenade. Here's the shaped charge with a steel frag case. So a traditional artillery round, you can either have it hit the ground for a concentrated explosive effect. If it hits the ground with a surface detonation, fragmentation effects are minimal. If you're in a trench, you can be protected. Artillery shells can also be airburst. You can set a fuse to make it detonate above a certain area to maximize the fragmentation effect. Cluster munitions are an entirely different thing, with 88 or 72 bomblets being scattered over a 100-meter range. This is just a devastating effect for vehicles, equipment, and personnel. Steel rain. So here is Defense Minister Reznikov's announcement and justification for using cluster munitions. I want to read this because I feel like it's very important. We welcome the decision of the U.S. to provide Ukraine with the new liberation weapons that will significantly help us to deoccupy our territories while saving the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. Under Article 51 of the UN Charter, Ukraine has a universally, internationally recognized right to self-defense, and thus we have been officially requesting these types of munitions for a long time. I would like to stress that in exercising our inalienable right to self-defense, we will continue to strictly comply with all international humanitarian conventions signed and ratified by Ukraine. So they're emphasizing that Ukraine is not breaking any international treaties, any international laws. They're complying with international law. So Reznikov does clarify where and when these cluster munitions will be used, they will not be used on the territory of Russia. They will not be used on any cities or urban areas in order to protect their own civilians. That's ultimately what this is about, saving and liberating Ukrainian lives. In addition, wherever they use cluster munitions, they will carefully keep records where these bomblets might have been scattered. The concern with cluster munitions is that when all the bomblets deploy, they don't all detonate. Some will just lay around, where civilians potentially years later could stumble upon them, it could detonate, and it could harm civilians. So Ukraine is committed to tracking where they will use these cluster munitions, and when the war is over, they will clean up and search for these unexpended bomblets after the war. But here's the problem with people arguing that cluster munitions shouldn't be used because of the risk to civilians. Russia is already using cluster munitions. They've been using them for the last 500 days. And Russia's dud rate can be upwards of 30% because Russia sucks at making weapons. 30% of the bomblets from their cluster munitions don't explode. They then just lay around on the ground where they can harm civilians in the future. Whereas the cluster munitions that the United States is sending, the dud rate is only 2%. So if the artillery shell has 72 bomblets inside of it, perhaps 2, when hitting the ground, will be duds and they won't explode. If you want to see videos of the Russians using cluster munitions on urban areas, deliberately using cluster munitions on civilians, I will link this video down below. This is the city of Kharkiv during the daytime. And if you want to see what cluster munitions look like at night, I'll link this video down below as well. Once again, the Russians firing on the city of Kharkiv. In addition, the concern about duds and munitions that don't detonate on impact, I've got bad news for you if that's your concern. The Russians have already fired tens of millions of artillery rounds, rockets, and cluster munitions, and the dud rate is double digits. There's millions of unexploded ordnance from the Russians laying all over Ukraine. So for Ukraine to start using their own cluster munitions, in the big picture, it's not really changing anything. And I'm actually going to make the argument that Ukraine using cluster munitions will actually make Ukraine safer. And this is just simple math. Let's say the Russians have laid down 100 landmines in the Zaporizhia region. They've mined everything. And Ukraine start using cluster munitions purposely to demine a certain area so their armored vehicles can get through. Well, if we started with 100,000 landmines, these are completely made up numbers, this is a hypothetical. But if there was 100,000 landmines in a certain area, cluster munitions were used to demine it, and after a bombardment, there's now 60,000 remaining Russian landmines, but 10,000 unexploded bomblets. Which field is safer? They're both really bad. But if you had a gun pointed to your head, and you had to walk through a field with 100,000 mines, versus 60,000 mines and 10,000 unexploded bomblets, objectively it's safer. If every time one of these artillery shells is used, it demines an area more than duds lay on the ground, net, it's safer. This is a stupid analogy. Everything is still unsafe, but that's the point I'm trying to make. It doesn't change the situation, and actually it can improve it if these cluster munitions demine certain areas. So when this war is over, Ukraine is going to have to go inch by inch through their entire country, demining everything. And they can easily get these dud bomblets when they have to demine everything. So I want to show you what the demining process looks like for any YouTube censors. Nobody's being harmed. This is not combat footage. This is what the demining process looks like and what Ukraine is going to have to do to every square inch of their territory. So there you go. That's it. If Ukraine uses cluster munitions, what are the negative consequences? And when the war is over and they have to demine every square inch of their territory, they're just going to have to trigger the explosion of a couple more bomblets used from these cluster munitions. So I argue it's not a big deal. Final thoughts I want to leave you with is from Jessica Berlin. It's ultimately for Ukraine to decide which poses the greater threat to their people, the passive danger of cluster munition duds in the future, or the active reality of Russian soldiers continuing to rape, torture, shoot, and bomb Ukrainian civilians now. So if cluster munitions can end this war faster, it will save Ukrainian civilian lives. Russia continuously bombs and targets Ukrainian civilians. Just yesterday, or 2 days ago, in the city of Lviv, they bombed a residential building, killing a dozen people. So let's do it, guys. Let's get this done. Let's get Ukraine the weapons they need. The next story we should follow up on concerns the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. The International Atomic Energy Agency claims they're making progress at inspecting the plant. For weeks, the Ukrainians have been notifying the world they've received intelligence that Russia has mined the plant, specifically the cooling system. So the IAEA was finally allowed to visit the plant, but it's taken them days to see only part of the plant. For whatever reason, the Russians don't want to give the IAEA inspectors full access to everything. And Kyiv is saying that tension around the Zaporizhia plant is decreasing, so perhaps it worked. The PR blitz, the continuous videos, the continuous tweets, the phone calls and messages to leaders around the world, it might have been enough to deter the Russians from blowing up the cooling system at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. But because the Russians are so weird, they certainly do look guilty, and they did it again. Moscow decree attempts to absolve Russian responsibility for nuclear accidents in the occupied Ukrainian territory. The decree, published on the website of Russia's Supreme Court, says it is aimed at ensuring the safety of nuclear power facilities in the occupied territories. This decree outlines three main decisions. Russia's nuclear agency, Rosatom, will hold no legal responsibility for nuclear accidents in the annexed regions. Any citizen of Russia who is affected by such an event has no right to financial compensation, and there will be no investigations carried out for any nuclear accident in the Russian-occupied territories over the next 5 years. How do any of these things ensure safety at a nuclear power plant in the occupied territories? All of this just looks like BS, so that nobody asks questions, nobody can go to court, and nobody will know the truth if there's an accident at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. It's so stupid, and the Russians are so bad at this. If you didn't see my last video, what happens if Russia destroys the nuclear power plant, I highly recommend checking it out. And this is what I've learned from my research. Statement from American Nuclear Society on Ukraine's Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. So when you actually talk to nuclear experts, nuclear scientists, people with decades of experience working around nuclear power plants, you're going to get statements such as this. In the unlikely event that containment structures were breached, any potential release of radiological material would be restricted to the immediate area surrounding the reactors. In this regard, any comparison between the Zaporizhia nuclear power plants and Chernobyl or Fukushima is both inaccurate and misleading. So when nuclear scientists and engineers make these statements, people who support Ukraine kind of get upset. And here's a tweet from Nate Mook. He's done fantastic humanitarian work inside Ukraine. I really like and support this guy. But here's his response to this statement. It is deeply disturbing this statement was even made. We should never be saying, hey guys, it won't be that bad of a nuclear disaster, so just calm down. The world must make it clear in no uncertain terms that an attack on a nuclear power plant will lead to dire consequences for Russia. So another Chernobyl event is not possible. Unless Russia heats up the reactors, turns them back on, and then blows everything, including the containment structure, this can't be another Chernobyl. So is it bad, blowing up the nuclear power plant, the cooling system? Yes, it's very bad. But as far as radioactive fallout, it would be contained to the local area around the plant. Not saying it's okay, it's a very bad thing, but it's not a Chernobyl event. So I do think what Russia wants is for all the Ukrainian civilians in Kherson and Zaporizhia to leave this territory. They want them to get on a bus or a train and go to Russia. One, because supporting a civilian population when you're trying to fight a war is resource draining and consuming. But I'm convinced the Russians view every civilian in this area as a partisan, sabotaging logistical supply lines, informing on Russian positions, calling in troop concentrations for HIMARS strikes. So I think Russia blew up the Novokakhovka Dam, and they want to blow up the Zaporizhia power plant in order to deprive the Ukrainian civilians in these regions of fresh drinking water, the reservoir is gone, and of electricity. And if they can scare them by saying that radiation is coming from the plant, they can force all of these Ukrainian civilians to leave this territory. I think that's ultimately what Russia is trying to do to make it easier to fight in this region. And their war is not going well. Ukraine's tank numbers now equal Russia's. So according to Bloomberg, these are the numbers they're using. 500 days ago, Russia had about 3,400 operational tanks. They had thousands more tanks in deep storage that needed maintenance or upgrades. But as far as tanks they could field on the battlefield, 3,400. Today, it's 1,400. Russia has lost over 2,000 tanks in the last 500 days. And as far as the Ukrainians, 500 days ago, they had about 987 tanks. Because they've captured so many Russian tanks, plus what's been donated from the West, Ukraine now has a tank advantage, 1,500. So it's going in the wrong direction for the Russians. And the Russian military is now targeting women in a recruitment ad. So Russia's defense ministry has launched a recruitment campaign targeting women for roles of doctors, nurses, and cooks in the military, with a possible deployment to occupied Ukraine. they're definitely going to be sent to Ukraine, but I don't know how many women are going to take up this offer to go be a cook in Melitopol. Russian construction firms are reportedly being told to send their workers to fight in Ukraine or face losing lucrative contracts from the city of Moscow. It illustrates an ongoing hidden mobilization as Russia uses every possible option to find manpower for the war. Yeah, that sounds about right. If you don't send your migrant workers from Central Asia to the war zone, you're going to lose your government contracts. Dmitry and Anton have a couple videos of Russian soldiers filming themselves, claiming they're taking horrendous losses and they don't have basic supplies like ammunition, food, and water. This video is 4 minutes long. I'll link it down below. Here's another video that came out in the last 2 days. Once again, talking about horrendous 50% losses for their units, and they don't have basic provisions. Cool. Let's check in with Lukashenko in Belarus. And Lukashenko tells Belarusians to calm down as Wagner's move still undecided. So Lukashenko didn't check with his own people before he announced it was cool for the Wagner mercenaries to relocate to Belarus. This would be thousands of Russian convicts, rapists, and murderers relocating to camps outside of cities in Belarus. Yes, I think the citizens of Belarus have a problem with thousands of Russian convicts relocating to their territory. So Lukashenko is being all wishy-washy about it, saying it's not fully done yet, it's not decided. This is a lie. He also said that Prigozhin is not in Belarus, and that as far as Prigozhin is concerned, he is in St. Petersburg. He's not in Belarus. Well, that wasn't the deal. How can Prigozhin still be in Russia? Putin has to want this guy dead. It's only possible for Prigozhin to still be alive and still be in Russia if the FSB is protecting him. If the FSB gave him a guarantee, work with us, work on our timetable, and we'll protect you. Even though Putin wants you dead, we'll just tell him whatever we need to tell him to manage him. But the FSB has future plans for Prigozhin. And Russian state media isn't doing a good job discrediting him. 2 days ago, they released all this video of the raid of Prigozhin's offices and Prigozhin's home, and they're getting the reaction from ordinary Russians. And they're saying Prigozhin is so handsome, joking about Prigozhin's extensive collection of fake outfits, fake disguises, wigs, and beards. And the internet has been having a field day with this, guys. I love the memes. Somebody Legoized all of Prigozhin's disguises. Here's the Spider-Man meme with all the different Prigozhins. And sure, why not? Into the Prigozhin-verse. This is a meeting of all of the, what's it called? The multiverse of Prigozhins. Okay, that's all we got. Final clip I have for you is a Ukrainian defender showing you his new cooking pan.
А чем ты тут занимаешься?
Мою сковородочку, она такая идеальная. Да, ивасиська называется. Вот, хорошо моется, она удобно моется, такая аккуратненько. Чик-чик называется.
Не поцарапай, чтобы антипригарное покрытие не
скатилось. Да, это ты правильно, Тифаль.
I don't care how much he scrubs it, I'm not eating a bowl of cereal out of a landmine. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending.
In the early 2000s, one of the largest speedrunning communities out there was for the classic NES game Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Dozens of players from all over the world competed with each other to set the fastest times they could on each of the 14 fighters, tracked with the in-game timer displayed during and after the fight. It was a thriving community. These guys sent emails back and forth detailing their strategies, posting on old websites like Game FAQs, and kept track of their fastest times using online leaderboards. There was a really fun mix of randomness and skill involved. New strategies for faster times were regularly found, keeping the game fresh and encouraging others to see just what they could discover. For years, Punch-Out! Remained as one of the most popular speedrun communities in the world. But by the mid-2000s, competition slowed down. People kinda just stopped playing the game, and in a matter of months, one of the most played speedruns out there suddenly lost all of its competition, and silently faded into the background while other games took its spot. By 2008, just about nobody was playing the game anymore. But then, in 2010, a player known as Sinister1 became the first player to speedrun the game in years. What he found was a deserted community. The game FAQs pages with strategy discussion had been deleted, emails sent back and forth had long been forgotten, and pretty much all that remained was a website called Red Tom's Punch-Out!, with a leaderboard that showed what the world record was for each of the 14 fights. Sinister1 was shocked by what he saw here. All 14 records were held by the same guy, a person named Matt Turk. None of them had any videos for proof, and it was hard to even find evidence on how Turk did each of these fights. After finding Matt Turk's email address and talking with him a bit, Sinister realized a couple of things. First, all signs pointed to every single one of these records being legitimate. And second, Matt Turk's skill level was way beyond any other player in the world, and there was pretty much no hope in anybody else beating some of them. At least, that's what he thought. These are the 14 world record times that Matt Turk had achieved by the time Sinister rediscovered the leaderboard. They didn't have video proof to go with them, but especially given when they were performed, that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Hardly anybody was uploading speedruns to the internet in the early 2000s. Turk did, however, write down some of his strategies in detail on Red Tom's Punch-Out! Site, explaining how he achieved many of his times and how others could do the same. He played the game for a decade and came up with so much. In my opinion, it's very likely that he performed all of his times legitimately. But to understand how good they were, we'll have to first understand the basics of the game. Punch-Out! Mainly involves dodging out of the way of your opponent's punches and hitting them with your own punches courtesy of the fists of Little Mac. Punching your opponent lowers their health bar and can eventually lead to a knockdown. 3 knockdowns in one round is a TKO, which will end the fight. It's also possible to KO some fighters, where they don't get up after Mario the referee counts to 10 and the fight ends. So, Turk achieved these 14 times from either TKOing or KOing each fighter. We'll break down how he did them later, but for Sinister1 to beat or tie most of them seemed out of the question. Thankfully though, 2 of them were world record freebies that anybody watching this could match with a little bit of practice. Glass Joe and Don Flamenco. Glass Joe is an infamously easy fight, and his world record is infamously easy to attain as well. His strategy simply involved waiting until he did his attack at 40 seconds. A well-timed punch to the face upon him charging forward will knock him down in 42 seconds, where he won't be able to get up and the fight will end at 42.00. Punch-Out! Runs at 60 frames per second, and there's 2 frames to time this punch for Glass Joe to get knocked down and stay down at 42.00. This world record has been at 42.00 probably ever since the game came out in 1987. The second relatively easy record is on Don Flamenco, the 4th fight in the game, with a strategy discovered by Martin Charlebois in the late 90s. To tie this record, Sinister had to punch him, dodge out of the way, then wait and punch Don Flamenco in the face on the last frame before he would block the punch. If he's able to land it in this 60th of a second window, he'll get a star punch, or an uppercut that deals more damage. To Don Flamenco, this punch does enough to automatically knock him down. He gets up, but upon dodging his punch and hitting him in the face 5 times, Don Flamenco goes down again and doesn't get up. It'll be a KO at 14.97 seconds, a world record that has been tied for at least 2 decades. Sinister tied both of those records in early 2010, but after that, it was going to be a lot tougher to knock any down. No more freebies. Now, he had to practice and try to improve his skills at the game. Throughout 2010, Sinister One got a lot better at the game and lowered each of his 14 times down, but they still remained comfortably behind Turk's times. Thankfully though, he got some hope later that year. A player known as Adelicott was interested in the Hippo record, which was another one that Turk had reached the theoretical lowest time on, 37.61. To pull it off, however, was another story. King Hippo is a super random fighter. On any punch he throws, he can either open his mouth or not. He has a 3 in 8 chance of opening on any given punch, and you can only hit Hippo when he opens his mouth. He needs to open his mouth 3 times in order for you to deal enough damage to beat him, so to get the fastest time possible, you need Hippo to open his mouth on each of the first 3 times he throws a punch. That's 3/8 times 3/8 times 3/8, or about 5.27%. But that's not all. Half the time, he also does a delay between his second and third punches. To get Turk's time of 37 seconds, he can't do that delay, which cuts the odds in half. So the sheer odds in getting the luck needed for this time were only about 2.64%. The execution was extremely precise as well, because of how the in-game timer works. It ticks faster than a real second, with an in-game second being made up of about 20 individual frames, or a third of a real second. For some reason, the programmers only made certain decimals possible to achieve on each fight: 0.00, 0.25, 0.48, 0.61, 0.82, 0.97, and 0.99. If you end the fight in the first few frames of an in-game second, you get 0.00. In the next few frames, you get 0.25, and so on all the way to 0.99. His time of 37.61 meant he could lose up to 2 frames before actually losing time and getting a 37.82. On average, you have to hit Hippo on either the first or second frame he opens his mouth on each punch. That is some really precise timing. Now keep in mind, even if you're able to execute that precisely, you only have a 1 in 40 chance of getting the correct pattern from Hippo. Sinister One's fastest time was a 37.97. But in October 2010, Adelicott came through and tied Turk's 37.61, which I mentioned before can't go lower at all. What's crazy is that even with all that randomness and execution, that was still considered one of Turk's easier records to match. With that, the Punch-Out community had managed to take down 3 of Turk's times. But these 3 all had something in common. Of Turk's 14 records, it was known that 4 of them were at their theoretical limit and couldn't be beaten, only tied. It had been known for years that you couldn't go under 42.00 on Glass Joe, under 14.97 on Don Flamenco, and under 37.61 on King Hippo, and all 3 of those times stand as the world records even today. But for most of the remaining fights, the limit on how low humans could go was unknown. Turk's times were incredible, but for most of them it was at least theoretically possible to take them a decimal lower. But in order to do that, you would need to either beat Turk's execution, or get better luck, or both. Enter Mr. Sandman. Turk's Sandman time was 220.00, the slowest of all 14 fights, but that doesn't mean it was his worst. You can't get star punches on Mr. Sandman to deal damage quickly, so even beating him in the first round is hard. We'll get into the actual strategy behind this fight soon, but in 2010, Sinister One was able to tie Turk's 220. It seemed like it was just another Turk time down, but then Turk actually responded and beat Sinister's time with a claimed 219.48, once again with no video. Sinister would get a 219.97 that wasn't recorded, but he couldn't compete against a 219.48. So Turk was back on top, and his time once again stood unrivaled. Until a guy named Zallard1 got his hands on the game.
Yes, dude, holy shit. What?
Zallard began playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out seriously in early 2013. One fight he gravitated to early on was none other than Mr. Sandman. This fight from July 2013 shows his strategy to beat Mr. Sandman quickly. Fights in Punch-Out can be broken down into phases, with Phase 1 being up until the boxer's first knockdown, Phase 2 being until the second knockdown, and Phase 3 being until the TKO. The first phase of the fight involves dodging out of the way of Sandman's rolling jabs and hitting him in the face. You also get hit a couple of times on purpose, and you'll see why later. There's two 50-50 random delays Sandman could do, and he did one of them, leading to a 120 first knockdown. Phase 2 involved hitting Sandman a bit more, then a random delay from Sandman before his Dreamland Express pattern. 3 extremely quick uppercuts that you have to avoid getting hit by. Zallard got the shortest delay from Mr. Sandman and then pressed left up, and left up really quickly in sequence to dodge the Dreamland Express. This allowed him to hit Mr. Sandman in the gut 18 times in a row to deal damage extremely quickly and send him down for a second time. Now here's where getting hit comes into play. It turns out that Mr. Sandman is programmed to do another Dreamland Express pattern if Little Matt gets knocked down at 159 or later into the fight. So a player named Jack Wedge figured out that by pressing select before the fight to lower your health to half, taking damage early in the fight, and then getting knocked down on purpose after Sandman's second knockdown, you can end the fight quickly after he does a second Dreamland Express.
Yes. Fuck yes, dude. Oh my god. Holy shit. What the fuck? Oh my god. I can't believe that.
This time from Zallard tied Sinister's 219, but he could still save a second in Phase 1 by not getting the random delay that Sandman gave him. But adding all that luck up across all 3 phases got crazy. He needed neither of Sandman's Phase 1 delays, the shortest delay for the first Dreamland Express, then a good health refill from Mr. Sandman for Phase 3, and the short delay for his last Dreamland Express. That put the odds at 2.34%. But even once Zallard got all of that luck, he also needed to just not mess up.
Yes! Oh my god. What is it? What is it? What is it? Holy shit, dude. Oh my god. I did it. This is it. I beat him at Turkton.
At long last, one of Turk's times had actually been beaten. Zallard1 was the guy to do it, and his time was celebrated across the Punch-Out community. It broke new ground, and made Turk seem not invincible for the first time since Sinister came onto the scene in 2010. It had taken 3 years for anybody to officially beat any of Turk's records. 4 times down, but Turk still had 10 records all to himself. One of Turk's finest times was his Piston Honda 2 record, 50.97. This time was remarkably close to the tool-assisted record for Honda 2, which was 50.25 seconds. A tool-assisted speedrun, or TAS, can create a theoretically perfect time by using save states, slowing down time, and even going frame by frame to enter inputs. 50.25 wasn't a real speedrun, but a demonstration of the fastest time possible, and Turk was just frames away from matching it. He was able to get it by doing guard manipulation, where you confuse Piston Honda by tapping and releasing up at strategic points to move his guard around so he can't block max punches. It's extremely difficult, and at one point requires a frame-perfect punch to the face while his guard is in a moment of weakness. Matt Turk's time mirrored the theoretical tool-assisted time, probably just losing a bit of time from losing frames from imperfect execution. Needless to say, beating Turk's Honda 2 time was nearly impossible, so it stood unrivaled with all of his other records. Meanwhile, in the years following Sinister One's initial Punch-Out grind, he had focused much of his efforts playing single segment, where you play the game from start to finish and add up your times in each of the 14 fights. He streamed his attempts live on his Twitch channel, and people had gotten used to him speedrunning the full game. But then one day in August 2013, he just started up a stream of Piston Honda 2 world record attempts. Keep in mind, Turk's record is 50.97, and it was impossible to go under 50.25, so there wasn't much room to get a world record. At least, that's what everybody thought.
That's it. That's it. That's it. I just beat the fucking Taz. Oh my god, I'm holding start so hard right now. I'm holding start more than I've ever held it in my life. Yes! Fuck yes! Fuck yes! Fuck yes! I just beat the Taz. I just beat the motherfucking Taz. Oh my god. It's gonna be a low 48. 48 flat. Oh my god, dude. Oh my god. I can't believe this is real.
He had just beaten the theoretically perfect tool-assisted speedrun by more than 2 seconds. Sinister had just pulled off a fight with his own 2 hands faster than anybody had been able to even theoretically figure out with an emulator. What had just happened? Well, unknown to everyone watching his stream, a few days prior, someone had figured out how to beat that theoretical Piston Honda 2 record. His name was McHazard, and after discovering it, he privately messaged Sinister One to tell him about his findings. The main issue with the old tool assisted time was here in Phase 2, where he had to wait a long time before throwing a star punch. Honda normally starts dodging any star punches you throw at him after the third one, but if you wait to throw it until he's doing his appropriately named eyebrow pattern, it'll land and deal damage. So, the tool assisted record had to stand still and wait until the eyebrow pattern began. McHazard figured out a way around that. He discovered that Piston Honda 2 has a bizarre mechanic that few other fighters in the game have: max damage uppercuts. When Honda's guard is down, you can press up and start to throw a star punch uppercut, then let go of up when Honda brings his gloves up. For whatever reason, if performed correctly, then not only can Honda not dodge this punch, but it also deals more damage than a normal star punch. So, Sinister simply implemented this max damage star punch when he would normally be waiting for the eyebrow pattern in Phase 2, and sent him down about 5 seconds faster than normal. Over the following months, McHazard would broaden his search for faster strategies to all 14 fights, and ultimately made a new, faster tool-assisted speedrun of the entire game. It featured improvements to 8 of the 14 fights, meaning 8 fights now had new theoretical load times that humans could try to get closer to. For the past few years, the only times of Turk that had been toppled were ones that were already theoretically perfect, or ones that were more obviously imperfect like Mr. Sandman. But with this new tool-assisted speedrun, the horizon expanded so much. McHazard had completely changed the playing field. It was time to see what else these players could do. The next big push to beat Matt Turk's times came during 1 week in April 2014, where 3 of Turk's records were about to go down. It's here we see just how important McHazard's task was going to be. Coincidentally though, the first one had nothing to do with his tasks. I mentioned before there was a 4th record Turk had set that was at its theoretical limit. That fight was Great Tiger, with his time of 47.48. Remember how Don Flamenco has that frame perfect punch to get a star? Well, Great Tiger has 4 of them. After punching Tiger in the face, you dodge out of the way of his jab, then wait until the last frame before he would block and punch him in the face. If you hit the perfect frame, then you get a star punch, before having to repeat this process 3 more times in the first phase. Thankfully, phases 2 and 3 are free. Great Tiger gets up on a 1 count twice, which means a single star punch from Little Mac will send him down automatically. There's no randomness in this fight, and thanks to a couple of timing strategies Zalor discovered to time a couple of the punches late in Phase 1, the only difficult part of the fight is the 4 face punches. But keep in mind, you have a 60th of a second to time each of them. Someone just had to grind the fight out until they got the 4 frame perfect punches, and on April 5th, Zalor was able to pull it off. He got a 47.48. tying Matt Turk and the theoretical perfect time. Meanwhile, Sinister 1 was working on his own project. Matt Turk's Piston Honda 1 time of 42.97 was a bit of a mystery, since it was one of very few fights where he didn't reveal his strategy. However, thanks to McHazard's new tasks, Sinister was able to come up with an even better one. Phase 1 was a variation of a strategy Sinister had discovered years prior, using heavy guard manipulation to sneak in punches all over and get stars. Key parts to this phase included landing a gut punch at the start with a 3-frame timing window, sneaking in an extra gut punch toward the end of the phase that had a 25% chance of going through, then not getting blocked at all on the last 3 face punches, which is about 50%. Honda gets up on a 1 count for phase 2, so a single star punch was enough to send him down right away. At the start of phase 3, Sinister would do a max damage star punch similar to the ones McHazard found on Piston Honda 2, then hit him in the face and do a couple of star punches. With a good health refill from Honda, it would be enough to get a low 42-second time and beat Matt Turk by just a little bit. The odds in getting this fight were under 5% from randomness alone, not taking into account the rather difficult execution. Nonetheless, Sinister very quickly got a run to phase 3, but unfortunately the bad refill from Honda meant he had to delay a couple of star punches and get a 43 instead of a 42.
Fuck. I got the bad refill. Yeah, 43 flat. God damn it. I got the bad refill, guys. Got the bad refill.
Sinister was getting really close. He was now just 0.03 of a second away from taking another Turk time down. All he needed was to get that good refill in phase 3. But then, quite literally out of nowhere, this happened.
Shouldn't I just quit right now? While I'm ahead? No, fuck that. Let's do the Von Kaiser IL strat. See if I can do it again. There we go. Holy fucking shit, dude. I think I just did it. Oh my god. What is happening? Oh my god. 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 Oh my fucking god, dude. Oh my god. 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 Oh my fucking god, dude. Oh my god. How? How is this possible?
If you recall from before, 35.97 matched Turk's Von Kaiser time. Where did that come from? Well, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out has no level select, and you aren't allowed to use save states to get to whichever fight you want. There is a password system, but passwords only exist for a handful of the 14 fights. So the fastest way to get to Piston Honda was to start a new game and beat both Glass Joe and Von Kaiser before getting your one shot at Piston Honda. If it didn't work, you'd have to lose intentionally and then beat Von Kaiser again just to get another shot. Sinister randomly decided to go for this newly discovered Phase 1 strategy that McHazard had found, and it happened to pay off. It involved precisely tapping up at certain moments to manipulate Von Kaiser's guard up so that all of the punches went through. He also had to get a random 50-50 star in Phase 2, and very precisely duck under a punch in Phase 1 and Phase 3 by double tapping down. He also had to time the first punch of Phase 2 on the first frame possible. In order to get a 35.97, he had to lose no more than a handful of frames across all of those locations. And on literally his first attempt after getting the Phase 1 strat to work, he got all of that. It was incredible. And a couple of days after that, Sinister was able to get his good refill on Honda 1.
This is it. This is it. This is it. This is it. Rip, Turk, you are done. I got the 42. Fuck yeah. 0.2 fucking 5, baby. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Get hype.
And with that, over the course of 4 days, thanks to the combined efforts of Sinister, Zallard, and McHazard, 3 of Turk's times went down. But of course, Matt Turk still held 6 untied records, and the more they played, the more these 6 times seemed ridiculously impressive. Keep in mind that some of the game's top players have been trying for 4 years now, and they were only able to match or beat about half of them. Let's take a look at Turk's Don Flamenco 2 time, 123.97. This one was a bit of a unique case. Skill-wise, it was actually one of the easiest times in the game, but luck-wise, it was absolutely brutal. See, the way Don 2 works is whenever he's about to throw a punch, you can hit him while he's winding up either in the gut or in the face. On the first punch you throw, and every 7th punch after that, you'll get a guaranteed star. On every punch between, as long as you're holding a star, you have a 1 in 16 chance in getting another star. And believe me, that is horrible from a speedrunning perspective. For example, you can theoretically get 3 random stars in a row on Dawn 2, which would be great, but your odds in that are 1 in 4096. His health refill in Phase 2 is also random. There's a 1 in 8 chance he gives the lowest health refill, a 3 in 8 chance he gives a middle refill, and a 4 in 8 chance he gives the bad refill. If you press select before the fight to lower your health to half, as speedrunners often do on this fight, that also makes his Phase 3 refill random, with just a 1 in 8 chance he gets up with the smallest amount of health. Why the programmers made Dawn 2 like this is unknown. It's not like anybody would pay attention to these random stars or refills when casually playing the game. But it leads to some pretty ridiculous fights if you get the luck. The tool-assisted speedrun of Dawn 2 gets 5 random stars and both of the low 1 in 8 refills, achieving a time of under a minute. The odds of getting those stars and refills is about 1 in 6.7 million. Turk's 123.97 was much slower, but Punch-Out players worked out that beating it still required odds of about 1 in 176. They would need a random star from one of the first 2 opportunities, then the middle 3 in 8 refill in Phase 2, then finally the 1 in 8 low refill in Phase 3. Someone just had to grind it out, and the guy who did it was a fairly unknown Punch-Out runner named Cananophone, whose specialty was speedrunning The Legend of Zelda. But he had also done some work in Punch-Out, and for some reason he gravitated toward fighting Dawn 2. And on May 28, 2014, after hundreds of attempts, he got all of the luck to align.
Oh, yeah. There we go. There we go. Hey, beat Dawn 2.
He had only beaten Turk by 1 decimal, but that didn't matter. Dawn 2 was done, and another of Turk's times had fallen. Matt Turk still had 5 times left. These remaining times had each stood unbeaten for more than half a decade. In that same length of time, the Ocarina of Time record had been lowered by 55 minutes, Super Metroid had been lowered by 5 minutes, and Super Mario Bros. Had been lowered by, well, 2 seconds. But the fact that even serious efforts from several of the world's top Punch-Out players hadn't been able to break these 5 times was just extraordinary. One of the most brutal times remaining was Turk's Bald Bull 1 fight. It featured a combination of crazy luck, really precise timings, and the need for persistence. Turk said it took him over 1,000 attempts to achieve this time. Keep in mind, to get an attempt at Bald Bull, you have to put in the password for Don Flamenco 1, then beat him, King Hippo, and Great Tiger. So, it took him a really long time to get his 58.99. The way he did it was by simply attempting to replicate the tool-assisted fight as closely as he could. And it was a brutal strategy indeed. It involved needing 3 random 50-50 stars throughout the fight, 2 specific patterns from Bald Bull, and numerous frame-perfect or close to frame-perfect punches throughout. The odds worked out to just a 2.3% chance, or about 1 in 43. There's actually been some confusion over what Turk's exact time was, initially being reported as a 57.99, but years later being changed to a 58.99. But regardless, this time just seemed brutal to beat. And then McHazard came along and changed everything. In his tool-assisted speedrun, one of the 8 fights that McHazard improved was Bald Bull 1. And a few months later, Zallard used it to do attempts to beat Turk's 58.99. McHazard's Phase 1 was discovered by Martin Charlebois 15 years before his task came out. It involved alternating face punches to get stars and using star punches into his rolling jabs. It was easy, it had no randomness, and it always got Bull down at 17 seconds with 1 star. Phase 2 was a bit tougher. You need a 50-50 random star at the start of the phase, then land a 2-frame punch just as Bull is lowering his guard and get another random star just after. You then need a 25% pattern where Bull throws more rolling jabs and can send him down with 3 stars in your inventory. For phase 3, Zallard used a slightly safer version of McHazard's fight. To pull it off, you need the 75% pattern without rolling jabs, then depending on his pattern after, potentially need to land a frame-perfect star punch after his uppercut. That's a 1/60th of a second window to time it. Across all 3 phases, that works out to odds of about 1 in 21, about twice as good as Turk's fight, and the execution was a bit easier too. So, Zallard set out to improve Turk's time, and on June 22, 2014, he came through and got a 57.00, beating Turk by nearly a full second. Keep in mind though, McHazard's task time was 55.25, so although Turk was off of his task by about 0.15, Zallard was slower than his by almost 2 full seconds. That's how much McHazard's strat was able to help. For Bald Bull 2, it was once again McHazard to the rescue. Turk achieved his time of 121.82 by landing extremely random punches called bulldozers. When Bull's guard is down, if you hit him in the face but let go of up while the punch is going off, it's possible the punch will get through his guard and hit him for a star. Problem is, when I say possible, I mean it has a 1 in 16 chance of actually going through. It was possible to beat Matt Turk's time using 2 bulldozers and getting a specific pattern from Bull after, but the odds in it were over 1 in 1,000. So McHazard found a way around it. When Bull's guard is up, he found you can punch him in the gut and tap up while the punch is going off to potentially sneak the punch through his guard. It was called a misdirected gut punch, and you could do it whenever you'd normally do a bulldozer. And rather than a 1 in 16 chance in going through, the misdirected gut punch had a 1 in 4 chance. So instead of odds of over 1 in 1,000 of beating Turk's time, the odds were only about 1 in 64. That was enough to get Sinister to start grinding to beat it. The execution wasn't too hard. The 2 rolling jab counters at the start were the hardest part, and they each had a 3-frame window. On July 5th, 2014, Sinister One took down Matt Turk's 11th world record.
World record! World fucking record, dude! Yes! Fuck yes. 120.82.
Thanks to McHazard, both of the Bald Bull records went down in the span of about 2 weeks. Matt Turk now only had 3 untied records to his name: Soda Popinski, Super Macho Man, and Mike Tyson. These 3 records had stood the test of time. These 3 records had stood through thousands of attempts from top players in the world. These 3 records stood head and shoulders above each of the other 11 records Matt Turk had set. To see why, let's take a look at that Super Macho Man time, 48.82. So, the good news about this fight. There's a password that you can put in that sends you straight there. That made it so you could do a lot of attempts really quickly. The bad news, the execution was really hard, and the luck needed was the worst of all 14 fights. Let's break it down. Macho's usual pattern is to throw 5 punches before standing still for a while in the build up to his mini spin pattern, where he spins around quickly and tries to punch you. For the first 5 punches of the fight, the first, second, fourth, and fifth punches all need to be uppercuts for Turk's strategy to work. So, Turk's strategy was to raise his guard and punch him in the gut, then intercept his first uppercut with a punch to the face before he ducks down. His second uppercut is then taken care of by raising Macho's guard to hit him in the gut again, then hitting him in the face before he ducks down. Punches 3, 4, and 5 are cancelled before he can throw them by hitting him in the gut. Then Macho stands still for his mini-spin pattern. Turk unleashed a barrage of max damage star punches and punches to the face and gut, all while moving his guard around by pressing and releasing the up button at strategic times. In order to get all the punches in needed to knock him down, Macho needs to stand still for as long as possible, which is only about a 1 in 4 chance. So, altogether, not counting attempts missed for execution, there was just a 1 in 34 chance of getting out of the first phase of the fight. For phase 2, Macho once again needs to stand still long enough to sneak in enough punches and uppercuts, and 3 stars need to be in your inventory by the time Macho backs up. That bumps the odds up to just over 1 in 90. The execution on sneaking each punch in also needs to be tight enough for the clock to not roll over to 37 seconds before beginning a spin pattern. And to give you an idea of how hard that execution is, these are the inputs that need to be done to sneak in all of those hits. Macho's guard is in transition, so you begin the phase by pressing up and B to throw a face punch but must release up while the punch is being thrown so Macho doesn't raise his guard to block it. Then, the uppercut is done by pressing up and start but releasing up right after Macho brings his guard up so it does max damage. Then, a technique Turk invented called the Dizzy Destroyer is performed. You tap up, then immediately release it and throw a gut punch, then press up and B to throw a face punch but let go of up while the punch is going off so Macho lowers his guard and the punch can hit his face. Finally, one more gut punch is snuck in by tapping up to bring Macho's guard up, then pressing B to throw the gut. That's a lot of inputs, and it's all performed right here at the start of phase 2. Then, Macho backs up to go into a spin pattern. In Macho's spin pattern, he spins around between 3 and 8 times before stopping for you to land your star punch. The clock stays frozen this whole time, but in order to throw your star punch fast enough, you need to know when he stops instead of doing another dodge. The 2 ways to do this were, 1. To listen for the last spin punch, which is slightly higher pitched than all the rest. Or 2. Stare at the clock, and then as soon as it starts moving again, throw the star punch. Phase 3 is a repeat of Phase 2, except instead of needing the long delay before a spin pattern, you need the short delay, since Macho gets up with less health the second time and doesn't need to be hit as much. That pushes the odds to about 1 in 181 in getting the luck needed to beat Macho in 48 seconds like Turk did, not to mention the precise, tight, and essentially flawless execution needed the whole way through. So we're looking at odds of about 0.5%, and execution harder than just about any fight in the game. Who would be crazy enough to try to top that? Well, Zallard won, of course.
And he gets up. And I'm like, okay, star punch. And he's just like, nope.
In the middle of 2014, Zallard began doing attempts to beat Turk's 48.82. He was a veteran of the game at this point, so he saw results very quickly, getting times of 50 and 49 in July and August, respectively. These fights both lost time in Phase 2 because the clock ticked over to 37 before the spin pattern, meaning his execution was a little too slow. But hundreds of attempts later, that 48 was still untouchable. Zallard realized that tying Turk's time would be hard enough, but actually getting under a decimal of 0.82 was going to be essentially impossible unless he added in something that Turk didn't do. So that's what he decided to do. He would assume that Macho would stop spinning on the third spin punch of Phase 3, allowing him to throw the uppercut faster since he didn't have to wait for the audio or visual cue. This didn't guarantee a time under 0.82, but it at least gave him a better shot. Unfortunately, it made the luck needed even worse. Macho has just a 5 in 16 chance of stopping on the third spin punch, so the odds of the entire fight were now over 1 in 500. Zallard streamed some of his attempts to beat Turk's time, but most of the attempts just looked like this. This 48.82 was legendary. Zallard threw attempt after attempt at Macho, but it wasn't happening. He had to hit punch after punch, be precise in every location, and wait for 1 in 500 odds. It didn't look like it was happening. And then, Zallard got this attempt past Phase 1.
Okay. Oh my god, at 25 with a star? That's fucking crazy. Fuck. Okay. Because I got that 25, that saved it. Yes! Holy shit, dude! Oh my god, please. Tie it, tie it. Tie it.
As he sat there waiting for the time, he was praying that it was fast enough to tie Turk's .82. But he knew there was a slim chance he had gone even faster and gotten a .61. All he could do now was wait for the fade out and see the blue screen.
Holy shit! Oh my god. It's over. It's fucking over. You gotta be kidding me.
A 48.48. Turk's time wasn't tied. It wasn't edged out. It was thoroughly beaten by Zallard 1. 1 in 500 odds were defied, and Matt Turk now only had 2 untied records to his name. This 213 on Mike Tyson was, by a long shot, the hardest fight to pull off out of all 14. On Don Flamenco 1, Turk hit a frame-perfect punch. On Great Tiger, Turk had to land 4 frame-perfect punches. To get his 213 Tyson, Turk had to land 20 frame-perfect punches. Tyson's pattern is to throw uppercuts for the first minute and a half of the fight. You can hit him twice after each one. The first one deals 5 damage as long as it's from the same side of the screen that Tyson threw from, and the second one normally deals 1 damage no matter what. However, if you delay this second punch to the last frame before he would block it, it deals 5 damage instead of 1. That's a frame perfect punch. You have a 60th of a second to time it. And for the first phase of the fight, literally all you're doing is landing frame perfect punch after frame perfect punch. Tyson begins the fight with 96 health. Since he could deal 10 damage on each punch Tyson throws, that means Tyson must throw 10 punches for you to be able to send him down the first time, and you need to be frame perfect on 9 of them to get an optimal first knockdown. Even if you hit the 9 frame perfect punches though, Tyson's pattern largely determines what time you get. He can randomly delay for an in-game second between certain punches, or potentially even do a long delay called the 8-second delay, which immediately kills an attempt. In Turk's 213, he got a pattern from Tyson where he flat out didn't delay at all, a pattern that was only about 3.5% likely and led to a first knockdown time of 54 seconds. For the second phase, he gets up with 56 health. That means 6 punches from Tyson, and you need to be frame perfect on 5 of them. Tyson could give random delays here too, so what's important is that you get Tyson to throw that 6th uppercut before he switches his pattern from uppercuts to hooks at 130. As long as the uppercut comes out before 130, it's all good, even if the knockdown comes a few seconds later since you have to punch him down. Turk got 1 delay from Tyson in phase 2, but thanks to his perfect phase 1, it led to a blazing fast 128 second knockdown. In phase 3, Tyson switches to throwing hooks. If you wait to the last 60th of a second before hitting him after he throws a hook, that single punch will deal 5 damage. If you're early, you'll have to punch him twice for 4 damage total, and if you're late, you'll get blocked and deal no damage. These frame perfect punches are generally regarded as tougher to hit than the uppercut ones. Tyson gets up with 40 health for phase 3, so 8 frame perfect punches would be a perfect phase 3. Turk hit 6 frame perfect punches and got a bit of a slow pattern from Tyson, but it was enough to set a world record of 213. This 213 stood apart from his other records in a way. Its legacy reached far past his other 13 times, and for years it was just this impossibly fast time that the top players couldn't even get close to. Not only did it land 20 frame perfect punches, but the pattern he got from Tyson was just ridiculous. He achieved this time in December 2007, with knockdown times of 54, 128, and 213. As of mid-2014, nobody else had ever gotten under 55 for the first knockdown or 129 for the second knockdown. Turk not only was able to get that 54 and 128, but then capitalized on it in phase 3 and played almost perfectly. Of course, other top players fought Tyson years later, but their best efforts came up short. In February 2011, Sinister One set his long-standing personal best of 219. He got a second knockdown of 132 thanks to a slower Tyson pattern, and then hit 4 frame-perfect hits in Phase 3 that end up with his time. For years, that was the fastest time with video. Then, in April 2014, Zallard got a 2:17 with a 1:33 second knockdown. 6 frame-perfect hits in Phase 3 led to the fast time. But still, Turk's time from 7 years prior was 4 seconds faster. They couldn't touch it. It stood alone. But then, in July 2014, Sinister One decided he was going to try to do it. Nearly all of Turk's records had fallen by that point, but his 2:13 was still standing. Sinister had 2 viable paths to beating it. The first was the long shot, where he would get the second knockdown by 1:33, which didn't require too much luck, then hit all 8 frame-perfect hits in Phase 3. Hitting all 8 frame-perfect hooks in Phase 3 could save 5 or more seconds over Turk's Phase 3, meaning his Phase 3 pattern essentially didn't matter. Hitting all 8 frame-perfect hits guaranteed he'd beat Turk, and could potentially beat him by several seconds. But of course, hitting all 8 was ridiculously hard, and had only been done a handful of times in the game's history over several years. So, he had another plan. The second method was what Sinister was aiming for. Getting a first knockdown closer to 1:30, then getting a better pattern from Tyson in Phase 3 and hitting 6 or 7 frame perfects like Turk did. He essentially just had to match Turk's execution, then get better luck at the end of the fight, and would end up with a time like 2:11 or 2:12. Sinister's personal best was a 2:19. Over the course of a few months in 2014, he put in thousands of attempts to beat Turk and get a 2:12 on Tyson. Here's how it went.
Whoa, 218. I got a PB. Yay, PB. Wow, 216, dude. Holy shit. I just beat Zallard. Oh my god, dude. Oh my god, that was almost a 54. Yes! Yes, dude. Oh my god. PB. Alright, at least I got a PB. Holy crap, man. Yes! I tied Turk at least, baby. I tied him. I tied him. I tied him. I tied him. I tied him.
Sinister had tied Turk's legendary 2:13, but he wasn't satisfied. He didn't want to match Turk, he wanted to beat him. It was 2:12 or bust. On September 6, 2014, the Punch-Out community woke up to this. A 210, not a 212, achieved by Zallard, not Sinister. While all eyes were on Sinister, Zallard had quietly been doing attempts in the background. His personal best was a 216, 3 seconds behind Sinister, but on one magical attempt, he dropped it by 6 seconds after landing all 8 frame-perfect hits off of a 132. It was the first time Zallard had ever hit all 8 in Phase 3. The 213 was done. Zallard was the new Tyson champion. And Turk only had one untied record to his name. Soda Popinski in 46.48. What was it about this fight that made it stand so long? Why did it outlast Dawn 2 with his absurd random stars? Why did it outlast Macho with the 1 in 500 pattern for the 48? Why did it outlast the 20 frame perfect punches on Mike Tyson? The answer was actually pretty simple. Nobody had any idea how Turk did it. Yeah, while Sinister and Zallard were spending months trying to beat each of Turk's 14 records, this one always just stood in the background. It was like a bad itch they just couldn't scratch. For all of the other 13 records, they at least had a path to beating them. They knew what he did and they knew how they could improve over it. For Soda Popinski, they had no idea. And since there was no video to go with it, they actually thought it could be a bogus time. Let's look at the fight itself. Beating Soda fast takes advantage of a bizarre glitch-like mechanic. When Soda throws an uppercut, if you press down to block or duck, Soda freezes in place. You're free to hit him in the gut when he does, and the star you get from that punch will automatically knock him down no matter what. So you just do that once in each phase to beat him very quickly. Soda is also very random. He always starts each phase with 2 hooks, but then he only has a 75% chance of doing the uppercut pattern you need to beat him quickly. He can also randomly delay before the uppercut, with only a 25% chance he does the shortest delay. So you'd counter each of Soda's first 2 hooks, then duck and hope Soda does the fastest uppercut, freeze him in place to get the star, then cancel his next uppercut and use the star to send him down. And if you did that in each phase, your time would be 49 seconds, 3 seconds behind Turk. You couldn't cancel his hooks any faster. You couldn't force a faster pattern. A 46 was just too fast. And so, long after each of Turk's other 13 records were beaten, this one stood, and stood, and stood. And then, McHazard came to the rescue. By early 2015, Zallard was very interested in finally taking Turk's last time down, so he asked McHazard for some help in figuring out how. McHazard pointed out that there were aspects of the tool-assisted speedrun for Soda that could probably be utilized in a real-time run. Namely, getting the frozen punch for a star quicker. The old process was holding down, then waiting for his uppercut, then having him freeze and punch him in the gut. With McHazard's method, you could press down, then assume he does the shortest delay and press B to gut punch, then press down while the punch is going off to freeze him in place. This works to get the star just the same, and it saves about 2 seconds, meaning phases could potentially be just 15 to 16 seconds long. And as it turns out, this is likely the method Turk used to get his time. The problem was, even with this strategy, beating Turk's time would be incredibly tough. You need both uppercuts and the shortest delay for each phase of the fight, which works out to odds of 1 in 151. The execution was tricky too, since the input of gut punching then tapping down was very precise. And what's more, Turk's time of 46.48 was very optimized for this strategy, meaning his execution was probably really tight. But at least Zallard had a strategy now. On January 24th, 2015, he did attempts on Soda, with low expectations given the hard execution and 1 in 151 odds. But on attempt number 8, he was able to get out of phase 1.
15! We got one. Now we just need 2 more in a row. Oh shit. Okay. Alright, What? 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 Alright. Okay,
By some miracle, it had taken Zallard just 8 attempts to get 1 in 150 odds. But this time fell short of Turk by half a second. And as Zallard kept playing, he realized that Turk's 46.48 seemed to have better execution than he could get with the strategy he was doing. A high 46 seemed way more likely than a mid 46. So, he had reached a dead end. But just a few days later, someone found something huge. His name was Jack Wedge, and he had played the game alongside Turk more than a decade prior, at one point holding the Bald Bull 1 world record. But he had come back all these years later to share a new strategy he had just discovered: the screwdriver. After canceling Soda's first 2 hooks, you could hold down a right dodge, then press B and then down to hit him in the gut right as Matt comes back to the center. This right dodge wasted the exact number of frames so that the gut punch hit Soda on the first frame possible to make the strategy work, guaranteeing the fastest phase possible. With this, Zallard knew he had a legitimate shot at beating Turk. He did more attempts to see what he could get, and on January 29th, 2015, he got this.
Oh, fuck. Okay. Oh my god, dude. Is that it? Is that it? Holy shit. Holy shit.
When Sinister 1 started to run this game in 2010, he had no idea what was in store for the future. Matt Turk's records were just too good. To quote himself, they had little to no chance at even sniffing some of those times. Instead, over the next 5 years, this is what the community accomplished.
That's it. That's it. That's it. I just beat the fucking Taz. Oh my god.
Oh my fucking god, dude. This is it. This is it. This is it. This is it.
World record. World fucking record, dude. Yes.
Yes! Holy shit, dude! Oh my god.
Yes.
Holy shit. No fucking way. Yes! Holy shit, it's fucking done. It's fucking done, dude. Yes! 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 Fuck yes! 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 Fuck yes! It's over, dude. That's it. That is it.
And with that, all 14 of Matt Turk's legendary times had been tied or beaten. It took half a decade, but thanks to the combined efforts of Adelicott, Jack Wedge, Cananophone, McHazard, Sinister One, and Zallard One, this monumental task had been accomplished. In the years since, nearly every world record you've seen in this video has been broken. There's been huge advancements in strategy and improvements in execution as well. So, let's jump forward in time and take a look at how today's records chalk up to Matt Turk's times. Thanks for watching. LEGO Star Wars: The Complete Saga. It's a game that millions played upon original release, and 15 years later, nostalgia is driving another wave of popularity. As more people play LEGO Star Wars, a question emerges. How quickly can the game be beaten? The LEGO Star Wars speedrun has the precision of a 3D platformer combined with the glitches and tricks of a broken NES game. And for the past few years, a dedicated community of runners have been battling each other to take the world record lower. This is the history of LEGO Star Wars World Records. And now, a word from this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. For years, a player named CabbageShirt300 was in search of the world's best mobile game. But then, a familiar game called Raid Shadow Legends introduced something new. In December 2022, Raid added MMA fighter Ronda Rousey as a playable character. She comes equipped with some of the most powerful skills in the game, and is perfect for both PvP battles and taking on tough bosses. By logging in and playing Raid for 7 days before February 20th, you automatically unlock Ronda. It seemed like Cabbage Shirt had found his perfect game, but then, something amazing happened. Raid recently introduced a special promo code RAID Ronda, where you'll obtain 3-day 100% XP boost, 500k silver, and 5 full energy refills. Just enter the promo code RAID Ronda in-game. Also, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you can get exclusive rewards in Raid right now. Download Raid now by scanning this QR code or clicking the link in the description. Not only will you be getting unique bonuses valued at $30, but you'll also be helping me out quite a bit. Scan the QR code now and start playing today. First, let's clear up any confusion with the timeline of the series. LEGO Star Wars the video game was released in 2005, where you could play episodes 1 through 3. This was followed up by the original trilogy in 2006, with episodes 4 through 6 being playable. Finally, in 2007, these games were combined into LEGO Star Wars: The Complete Saga, allowing you to play through all 6 episodes. While the 3 versions are all speedran today, the most popular one by far is The Complete Saga, the topic of this video. Now, the earliest full game speedruns of The Complete Saga date back to 2013, but it's a bit of a hazy timeline. See, back then there was no concrete rule set. The initial method was to play through episodes 1 through 6 in order on the game's Super Story mode, which adds a timer to the bottom of the screen and doesn't have status screens between levels. Later, runners switched to playing the episodes on Replay Story, meaning you can use any red brick upgrade on any level. Since these records didn't have a standard rule set, and also some were filmed with a potato, we'll skip going over them in detail. However, serious props should be given to the record holders, Poshakt and Lexos, the champions of the Complete Saga's early era. For the next 2 years, no records would be set. But in 2015, the community began to form once again, and for the first time, standardized rules were created. All runs would be played on New Game instead of Replay Story. All red bricks, which are unlockables that give you a special ability, were banned. And you could only play with one player. Calling in player 2 at any point was disallowed. These rules formed the backbone of runs starting in 2015, and the first record to abide by them was played by SM Kirky, clocking in at 3 hours, 44 minutes, and 46 seconds. Now, this might seem long for a speedrun, but LEGO Star Wars is a long game. It has 36 levels, most of which take several minutes to get through. On top of that, there are also nearly an hour of unskippable cutscenes between the levels. So, how did SM Kirky speed the game up? Well, his general strategy can be seen in Negotiations, the first level in